Take Review, where college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Subchukchai Bankard, and I'm here with two girls that used to work at Runway. First, may the bridges he burns light his way. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
What do you mean, no? I'm not talking about killing other people yet. I'm doing great, Jen. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really actually excited. I think this is going to be a fun one. And look what TJ Maxx dragged in. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
In a world where everyone shouts and complains and whines and screws up and tries to cover up, there's you. Hi, Jen. It's great to be back. Maybe PT took my mean one, so I had to find one really quick and
nice
with a nice one. I was tempted by "You'll Always Be My Girl," but it sounded oddly romantic when I said it out loud earlier. So.
That was a good call. Good instincts there, Greg. So, for your listeners, those were all references to the film we are here to review today, The Devil Wears Prada 2, which is in theaters now. 20 years later, award-winning journalist Andy Sachs, played by Anne Hathaway, if you recall, finds herself desperate for work amidst the total collapse of modern media. We'll talk about it. A job offer lands in her lap, but it means she'll be working for the uncompromising tyrant Miranda Priestly once again. If you are listening to us for the first time, we'll have a spoiler-free section designed for those who have not yet seen the film, and then, with a very clear alert, we will shift into spoiler mode for the rest of the show. PT, if listeners think we're the hottest look this season, what can they do?
If you think we are the fire, then please follow the Long Take Review wherever you get your podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and many more. Wherever you're listening right now, you can find us there. You can also follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. We are also on Letterboxd. You can follow the account at LTRpod, or you can search for the hashtag LTRpod to see what each of us individually has been watching. Jen?
Thanks, PT. So, as always, we're going to start with the short take. What was everyone's general reaction to The Devil Wears Prada 2? As our resident fashion editor, Greg, maybe you should go first.
I would be delighted to. So I can't remember if in our last episode I previewed how I was going to watch this, but I went to the opening night fan event at my AMC, which was completely sold out.
Wow.
And it was a great night at the movies because the crowd was really into it. There were not really costumes, although I was sitting next to a man wearing a full suit. Whether he came from work or dressed for the occasion, like, jury's out. But there were a lot of like custom t-shirts and like big groups of friends out to see it. And it was like a great time. And I got a free magazine and free sunglasses and like all this like swag stuff. And then the movie played, and I have to say, I thought this was pretty good. I think it's fair to say that the burden of a Legacy sequel is that it has to come up with a reason why it needs to exist besides just fan service. And I thought that while this did a bunch of fan servicey things and had little moments where you're supposed to, point at the screen and go, oh, it's just like before. I thought this actually could stand on its own as a movie, right? It might not totally hit in the same way, but it had a plot. It had things it wanted to say. It had things it wanted to examine. And I laughed a lot. I got moved a couple times. It's not a 5-star, I'm going to watch this all the time. But, I think the most important piece of a Legacy sequel is that they don't embarrass themselves. And I think this was far from embarrassing anybody involved. So I'm thumbs up as a fashion editor. PT, as a fashionista, where are you sitting?
As a person who mostly responds to fashion by hearing the David Bowie song "Fashion" in his head for like a minute after it comes out, I had a great time with this. I was unfortunately not able to join you two for the episode, the last episode you can find in your Long Take Review podcast feed, where Jen and Greg both talked about the first movie. But like Jen, I had not seen the whole movie until I watched it in the last couple of weeks in preparation for this sequel. So I knew a lot about it. I had seen a bunch of clips, but this isn't like ingrained in my soul as like a core text or even a repeated text that I've carried with me for a long stretch of time. So I was pretty ready to go into this movie and be like, okay, like whatever. Because yeah, this sort of like latter day sequel, like we've waited a couple of decades, we're going to bring the people back, very frequently to, as I think Greg was implying, can be sort of shallow and empty, a lot of fan service, not a lot going on besides just sort of smashing the member berries button to be like, remember this? Isn't that fun? Isn't this nice? And yeah, I was also very happy to be like, no, this movie has something to say. It also, I feel like it started from the foundation of like where I felt I was as a first time viewer after the last one ended, where I was just like, oh wow, yeah, like what are you going to do? Are you going to have your long career in the print magazine world? Or are you going to have your long career in the print journalism world? Wow, like what future you have before you, these choices. And it kind of starts there with just sort of like, right, those industries are in shambles and many aspects of society are contributing to that. And we're going to sort of have that be the background, even more so than like the fashion world, even though as I heard from people talking about this, there's more of the fashion world in the first one for various reasons. But it's not as much the sort of background of the story and the background of the themes as much as media consolidation, billionaire acquisitions, and sort of the trampling of the basic tenets of society by the oligarchy. Great, like, and that sounds great to be a blockbuster movie talking about those things. So I had a pretty good time, and this is both of these movies are rooted in the performances of 4 actors who were eminently likable and watchable and playing characters that are very fun to spend time with. So yeah, I mean, I had a good time. I don't think it's going to be a movie I'm going to watch religiously every year for the rest of my life. But like, what a nice, solid return sequel. And yeah, I was happy to watch it and had a good time with it. Jen, what did you think as another newbie to the Pradaverse?
Yeah. So after, the recording that Greg and I did and watching the original movie for the first time, I really was trying to manage my expectations for this. And I'm being like, it's just a cash grab sequel, right? Like, and it is still, right? Like, let's be honest. That's why they're doing this movie. But at the same time, when I actually saw the sequel, it really exceeded my expectations. It's way smarter. The screenplay is way smarter than it needs to be. And I think one of the reasons that this is successful is because that core cast returned, but not just returned, but has actually they've had amazing runs as actors and have actually gotten way better as actors, even though they were really good in the first one anyway. You know what I mean? Like Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, Stanley Tucci, like those 4 like are just like veteran actors at this point and are just like masters at their craft. So this is like effortlessly good performances for them. You know what I mean? So I think that's part of it. But I do think that the story actually feels like they thought a lot about how to do the thing Greg was talking about how do we make this justified? How do we tell a story that doesn't seem like it's a means to an end for kind of doing the remember berries thing that PT was saying. If you look closely, it does do the Force Awakens thing of like, in the moment you're like swept up in the fun and you don't notice, but then when you like kind of stop and think about it, you're like, wait, the plot is exactly the same. It has like this kind of thing, then this kind of thing, then this kind, you know what I mean? Like there's a checklist of things that they did in terms of the beats of this movie that has just like a slightly different version of it. But at the same time, I do think it was really smart in terms of pivoting the story to make it updated and appropriate for 2026. And we'll get into that once we get more into spoiler territory. But yes, in general, I was pretty happy. I left being like, that was a really good time and was better than the average sequel of this kind that I really, again, like was trained to be like, this is going to be dumb because it's a sequel 20 years later and they're just trying to make it into a franchise when it's not supposed to be. Now that if Devil Wears Prada 3 becomes a thing, I don't know. We'll have to revisit it. I think.
Is this a good time to discuss like they did such a good job, I think. And I will admit only now while we were talking, did I check. I knew the director had returned. I didn't realize it was the same screenwriter as the original movie. So, same team in that regard, plus the cast. And it was so thoughtful. They really didn't have a better title than Devil Wears Prada 2. There was no like Devil Still Wears Prada. Devil Returns.
That feels just like a marketing thing where someone at the studio was like putting their foot down, being like, no, we just need to call it number 2 because then people will go.
Okay. Is
They
that? I
like the
wonder
original.
if the Wicked for Good like not working as well, they were gonna have a Devil Wears Prada : something, and then they were like, let's make it 2. We like 2. It worked for The Godfather. We'll do it for this.
It's funny because we got away from that for so many years, and this is like a resounding return. And I think you're right. Maybe the Wicked scared them a little bit. And my favorite of late is Ready or Not 2, which applied the lesson that Now You See Me needed to apply, but couldn't get rid of the 2 as well. So it became Ready or Not 2: Here We Come, which is very silly in general. Wait, I have a question for Jen. This is very important. So in my 30 minutes sitting before my screening, they had a big title card up that said, Devil Wears Prada 2, and it had the 4 actors. And I was debating long take review hosts as those 4 characters / actors.
Oh.
So I think here's my opinion. Jen automatically, just as the one running the show, gets to be Miranda, right? Also, your cruelty and how much PT and I cry suggests that.
That's true.
Okay. And then look,
you're always flinging clothes, like outerwear at us to deal with.
Then we both would aspire to it, but there's no other choice than our dearly departed Antonio for Stanley Tucci's Nigel, right? Like it's
the immediate response. Yeah,
like it's just we can't even pretend.
For first time listeners, he's on leave. He's not dead. Like he's not departed. He's just not currently recording on the podcast.
Dead to me. So then, Jen, the question becomes: is PT the Emily and Greg the Andy, or is PT the Andy and Greg the Emily? Which way are you going?
Wow.
And one of us will probably get off the call as soon as you answer.
Well, I mean, that could go either way. It really depends on who.
Well, that's why you have to make a choice, because it could go either way.
You're the editor.
I mean, I think we're just the Gregs. So I think that means that or that's the easiest way to say it, is just sort of we're interchangeable in Jen's eyes as Emily and
no, this is a great question, because the Andy character clearly has to have more of a soapbox attitude towards the world, right? She's out there trying to save journalism,
editing magazines,
and then so who's more of the sellout? Because that's the Emily, right?
Who?
I mean, that's a great question, Jen. What's your choice?
Yeah. You just made your job harder by framing it that way.
So anyway, I want to make this easier. One of them's much worse than the other one is much better.
What's a terrible
but then here's the counterpoint, is that the Emily character has so much more confidence, and is so much more clear-eyed, whereas who's the one who's like Andy and needs constant validation and is bumbling constantly, right? So it's there's upsides and downsides.
Like, don't worry, they're both terrible, and they're okay. You're both terrible.
I hate you both, but let me pick which one.
Jim, do you want me to save you?
Yeah, what would you do?
Well, I will just say, when posting The Devil Wears Prada long take, I tagged Greg as Miranda because he edits a fashion magazine and is the snarkiest, and I tagged you as Anne Hathaway, which by default would make me Emily Blunt. So
right. Okay.
You can just reverse it if Greg says you're Miranda, you can give Greg.
Yeah, I don't want to be talking about this anymore. So yeah,
and feel like you have justification for it.
So let's do the recommendation algorithm, in which we establish the audience of a film. So we acknowledge that not every film is for everyone. I mean, clearly, since this is a sequel, do we think that both the fans of the original are going to be happy? Based on our short takes, I would say yes. But can this actually bring in like a new generation of fans, of people who hadn't totally missed it the first time around?
I was very curious about my students. So 18 to 20-year-olds and what they would make of this movie. So, interestingly, I think I said this at the end, for the local premiere, they invited a bunch of our fashion students to come have a little mini fashion show in the lobby of the local Showcase Theater to celebrate the movie. And so I talked to some of those students the morning after, and they said they loved it. So that gave me a lot more hope for this, because in my mind, the kind of glamour of the first one having faded at this point might turn off some of that audience that kind of wanted the escapism of fashion. But it seems to not have, at least in my limited sample size, and that's exciting. I have heard other critics point that this is much more of a downer than the first one, but I don't think I don't think I agree with that critique. I think it's more realist and less escapist, but I think ultimately the point of the movie is that if you are good people, you'll be okay. So maybe that belongs in spoiler section. And some of those good people are bad people. But I do think that it's kind of still pretty hopeful despite it being set in the world that is aflame and breaking down left and right. So I think I can't imagine somebody who's like a casual movie fan being unhappy with this as a sequel. And it's been really interesting to listen to how many people in my life that I wouldn't expect are like huge fans of this are coming out and being like, oh yeah, I love that movie. I can't wait to see the sequel. So I think it's going to do really well. I know the opening was good and I think it's going to chug along because there's a lot of summer left for it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think from my understanding, the opening was quite great. Like it exceeded the expectations. It was above the higher estimates of what it could do, and especially the international market was much higher than was expected. So yeah, I mean, I think sort of maybe to Greg's point there at the end, I think that part of like not an issue I'll take with Jen's question, but one thing I would like say to augment it is there are a lot of people who are big fans of Devil Wears Prada. So even if it was just the fans of Devil Wears Prada came out, like you'd probably, that's why they made it. Like this will be a pretty successful movie if just the fans come out to check it. And I think that it is something that has accumulated some cachet over time. It's one of those movies that has, I think, aged really well, and I think people have carried it with them. It's not just people who were there in the moment who are there to enjoy it. But yeah, I think I agree with Greg. I think there's a lot of there's a lot in there. There's just meat on this bone. Like there's just something that like is being discussed and something being talked about. And we can get into, when we get into spoilers, we can nitpick whether it's like, does that make sense? Or like, is that something that character would do? And which I feel like the biggest, in a way, the sort of biggest like pushback I've seen on this movie is from people who are really big fans of the original, who think some of the characters shouldn't have done the things that they were doing. But like, that's in the, like, they're in deep. That's like, us Star Wars fans just being like, wait a minute, like where it's like, okay, but like actually how do regular people enjoy this movie? What are the normies doing? And as someone who's definitely a normie for Devil Wears Prada, I think this movie, did a really good job. And what I would say in terms of recommendation algorithm is like, basically if your default is to think, oh, they brought all these people back, it's 20 years later, like this is going to be a cash grab, this isn't worth it, is like, if you think you might like it, it's worth giving it a chance. Like this actually does have like a good continuation of the story and of the characters, and has something to say about what's happened in the world in the 20 years since the last one. And not every legacy sequel has done that. So let's like, again, I would say it's less about trying to get people who never had a connection and more the people who are on the fence just because of how it exists, that they should give it a shot, because I think they'll probably find more than they expect.
And I do think it is one of those things. Greg mentioned big groups of people, like friends going to go see this. If you're the one friend who's like, wait, I haven't seen the original, I actually think you're going to be fine, because the repeat jokes, like the one-liners that come back, I still laughed at, even if I'd heard them before. And I can't imagine, like in context, like if you heard them for the first time and you weren't aware that it was a callback, I think it also still works, which is again unusual for something like this. Can anyone think of a sequel that is a similar style sequel? You know what I mean? Like for like I'm thinking of those math equations that are like the analogies, right? Where it's like Devil Wears Prada 1 to Devil Wears Prada 2.
Right. This is weird.
This to this.
Mm-hmm. This is weird, and I don't know if it works, but the one when Jasmine and I saw the movie and then we left and we're talking about it afterwards, we sort of fell upon Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049.
Oh yeah.
As like, oh, why are we making a sequel to this? That doesn't make any sense. Like that sounds like a bad idea. And then it was like, oh no, this is actually really good. And like you did a really good job of like taking it and carrying it forward. And that's obviously, it's very sci-fi, it's world building and kind of carrying things out in that direction. And I have also heard some people push back on the idea this shouldn't be called a legacy sequel, because legacy sequels involve a new generation of people, and then the old generation are supporting characters, and this is just the old generation back. I don't know about that, but anyway, but yeah, I think there's something to this sort of like, okay, let's just take this world and let's see where it would be. In that instance, it was 30 years later, and like, how do we build out on that? And obviously this is a more grounded, realistic thing, but it was, let's take these characters, let's go 20 years forward and try to see what would their lives be like if we went forward from it. And so, yeah, and again, like, I think both of these sound like terrible ideas for movies, but then actually it was like, oh no, but like, it turned out pretty good. I would take Blade Runner 2049 over this movie, but I would take Blade Runner over Devil Wears Prada because I am a stereotypical man. So, so be it. But yeah, that's my first thought that came to mind. Greg, did you have something?
You didn't want to go for Mad Max Fury Road? I mean,
it feels a little.
It's not at all tonally different, really. I don't know. What do you think? You're the expert.
I mean, to me, that starts to feel like, as much as I like Blade Runner 2049, that starts to get into like, oh yeah, well, so it's one of the best movies of the century. It's comparable to that, but that is similar in that it's like same director, like same sort of like core. It doesn't have the same cast because of time going by and various issues. But where there is something similar to that. There's also Top Gun Maverick. If we want to talk about like, there's one movie that people really like, and then we came back a long time later with the same star, and like, it was good, but I think Top Gun Maverick changed more things. It was more of a different structure of the movie, to Jen's point. Like, the vibe, the sort of overall like outline of this movie isn't really dissimilar to the outline of the first movie, in a way where I feel like Top Gun is just different because it was like the school, and then the stuff like maybe the like action beats are pretty similar. I haven't done a comparison of that, but those are all like in that conversation. I think the fact it's in the conversation with those, like, these were really good follow-ups that came decades later and we're surprised how good they were. I think it's like in that zone of maybe not, again, reaching to all those levels, but maybe I'm being biased because there's movies made for certain types of people and there's movie made for other types of people. And I'm, whatever, outside the target audience.
I was thinking a lot about Top Gun because I would probably say, and noted your quibbling with the language. I think that's totally fair. But I think Top Gun would be my top legacy sequel, of recent memory or pretty, I mean, Force Awakens, I'm just setting aside because that's Star Wars, and Star Wars is always different. But that to me felt like a really great movie. But the difference is that movie went hard out of its way to say nothing. It didn't want to name a country that were the villains. It didn't want to get into the politics or the idea of this. And the other thing is it was actually a plot point in that movie that Maverick had been stuck in the same place. And while we're all talking about the way you have to update a world, I think it's also important that you don't have characters who have just been doing the same thing off screen for 20 years. Like, I think it's important that you acknowledge that they move on. Like, if these 4 people had still been working at Runway all this time, you're like, really? You get into that office problem where you're like, some of these people should have left the office by now. Like, they're in a toxic work environment and they should have quit by now. So I'll cheat with the question. I will say the sequel, latter day sequel that it reminded me the most of is very recent, which is the Scrubs revival. Because I think similarly, the world of hospitals and medicine has changed dramatically. And so just by virtue of kind of taking your same core characters and putting them in the place, and maybe that was on my mind because this revival that just happened had a plot point with SNL's own Vanessa Bayer, that was the HR rep who just, every time Dr. Cox would yell at them the way that he used to yell at he'd yell at the new interns the way he used to yell at our oath, she would just go, take it down. I'm going to need you to take it down. And so when that kind of gag started here, which I'm not entirely clear why it was the assistant who got to check Miranda's attitude. But I was like, oh, they actually found the same plot beat in their planning. So, but I think that's a key to me, is that I want to revisit characters, but actually Star Wars had this problem in the old EU, which is like, if they're the same for 30 years and nothing has changed with them, it starts to feel false to me. So I really appreciated this as a sequel where they really changed like their situations and everything made sense. It was a little bit of a contrivance to get them all back in the same movie, but like, that's where it's like, yeah, do it. Because why would you want to do this without Emily Blunt? Why would you want to do this without Stanley Tucci? So Yeah, but I mean, I would say there's your PT's right that they're so hard to compare, but I think I would say this was like more true to like the original than the Top Gun Maverick was to Top Gun. But I'm not that committed to Top Gun, the original, even though I do play shirtless volleyball a lot.
Okay.
What did you play shirtless beach football? As in Maverick?
Dogfight football, you mean? I do not, because it's fake.
So what you're both making me realize is that, yeah, maybe legacy sequel is the wrong term for this one, because a lot of the things you're dropping have to reckon with like being haunted by something in the past of the first movie, right? So like in Top Gun, it's like, oh, we go visit Iceman or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, or it's like, oh, the person who died in the previous movie, we now have to like deal with either a child of theirs or like pictures of them and be like, yeah, they were a person in the other movie. And same thing with what was the other one that you just mentioned? Top Gun does it. Sorry, you did not mention this. Is just in my head. Sorry. It's terrible.
What was that really smart comment somebody was just bringing up? It was like
a great idea.
It couldn't have been one of you two.
Level idea.
The other example that I'm thinking of is Twisters, right? Where it's like photos of the cast of the, you know what I mean? Like,
That's true.
And part of that is a very practical reality that this movie did not have to deal with, in the sense that either actors have aged to the point where they couldn't or didn't want to be in the movie, or have passed away, or, you know, like there's like a production reality of it. This movie just did, because all four of them, as I said at the top of the show, like are just like, yeah, we're great. We're
yeah,
let's go. Right.
Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's something actually, but it's also like we're saying, still really dynamic, because all of those characters and all of those actors are still just as vibrant and active as they were in the original film, but their characters have gone on an arc and continue to go on an arc in this movie, which again, I was kind of surprised by, because most sequels don't bother to have their characters kind of like change and grow over time. If the goal is really just to be like, let's run it back and make people happy again. Right. But anyway, it seems like we should really go into spoiler mode now. So I'm going to make the move. If you have not seen The Devil Wears Prada 2, we've already talked it up as a good time. So you should go see it, and then we'll be here waiting. Maybe we won't have aged as well as all the actors in this movie by the time you come back, but we'll be here. So I don't know who it was, but somebody added the biggest spoiler. Actually, for some reason, my brain wasn't wired to try to think of this. It was Nigel all along. Okay, Greg. So like, why, Greg, why are you starting us off with this?
Because that's the best part of this movie. Yeah. I loved this beat. So it takes you right to the end. And so what we're referring to, listeners, because you definitely didn't hit play if you haven't seen this, but just to refresh your memory, is there's all this contrivances at the beginning to make it so that the boss of the company hires Andy back to Runway to run the feature segment and to do real journalism. And it's kind of these two conspiring events of a fast fashion fiasco where Runway is in trouble and looks like it lacks integrity. And then Andy winning an award and going viral for a speech where she's crying because she lost her job as she accepted the award. And it hinges on, speaking of The Office, a text message to BJ Novak. Probably the worst part of this film is BJ Novak. I'm just going to go out of my way to just throw.
You mean the character or the performance, or both?
Both. I mean, okay. he's out of his depth, right? I mean, he's out.
The problem is, I think he's very accurate as that kind of bland, boring person.
Yeah.
But it did not make me feel like BJ Novak's making such interesting choices to be so bland and boring. It was more just like, oh yeah, BJ Novak's here and he's doing his stuff. Okay.
It was 100% when Ryan gets the promotion in whatever season of The Office that is and comes back. And so it hinges on, we just see at the beginning of the film that his character has received a text message of the video, and he offers it to his dad to be like, look, like maybe this is the answer. And we find out, and I didn't think another second about that. So I'm just confessing this worked really well for me. And then at the very end, we find out that Nigel reveals he's the one who sent the text, and that's where the line I chose not to utter at the opening, which is like, "You've always been my girl," which is really sweet and wonderful. And like, as much as there's good humor about how the characters forgot that she existed, now it's like, no, like he remembered the whole time and watched her career, right?
Mhm.
So it was great. So and the final shots where they're all just at work at the magazine together like a little family, I mean, thought were beautiful. And just I liked that in the end, yes, they all ended up together. They found their way, and it was like deliberate. And the smartest person in either of these films, controlled it all. So that's why I wanted to start there, because that was my absolute favorite part of this.
And you're also forgetting like or what I would put also with this in terms of just the like niceness of the ending of this movie is the moment that Miranda realizes that she's that Nigel's been there for her all this time, and she's kind of like, she asks him finally, "Have I overlooked you? Like, you're," and finally says like, you're ready to kind of take over for me." And in a way that is like, I was very moved in that moment when I'm like, oh, she's doing it. But that, like, and you could call it pandering. Like, I think emotionally this movie is pandering at the end, but I don't care because it was so nice. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, it gave me what it from at the end of the first movie I was kind of yearning for, where I'm like, well, if these characters could have just talked to each other for 5 more minutes and then like resolved all their issues and gotten along and given each other a hug. That's what the end of this movie does, which I found very satisfying. I can see other people saying it's kind of corny or a betrayal of the first movie or whatever, but I really liked it.
Plus the gorgeous shot. That shot totally worked for me, where you pan out the window and see him. Sorry, PT. I just wanted to throw in like, there's also like some movie making there that's great too.
I like that too. I did hear, I was able to listen to the big picture discussion of this movie, and they liked it. They were overall positive. And one of the things that Sean Fantasy said, which I get, is that like, it's not the most like interestingly directed, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things he's like, there's this flaw of drone camera work where it's like, how many times do they start somewhere and then pull back and back and back and back and back, and then you see this bigger picture, but it's the same smooth sort of trajectory. And when he said that, I was like, that's true. Like, this movie does that a lot. A lot of places do that. Like a lot of movies or shows will do that, like top down, of like, you get like almost like the map view of the ground.
The Apple TV screensaver move.
Yes,
absolutely.
Exactly. But I, when I was listening to that, I was thinking in my head, kind of what Greg was saying, was like, but it works so well at the very end, like that office layout and setup of the three of them in their offices. Like, that worked really well. It didn't bother, like, that made it almost worth it that they had it, maybe overused it at other times. I think that that's really great. There is, like, if you want to be the nitpicky complainer, because I always can find people talking about movies online who are like, no, what about this thing? Where they're just like, well, this guy, they didn't talk for 20 years, and this guy is like, oh, immediately I'm going to think about that person. But I think it read to me, to Greg's point about just like, no, he always was like keeping tabs on her, even if they were not in communication, they were not like texting or emailing each other. They were, he was proud of her, felt the connection to her. And that was good. I do think I will just say, again, having not been on the last episode, so not talked about the last movie, one of the things I really liked about seeing, when I watched the first movie finally all the way through, was like, there was no redemption for Miranda Priestley. Like, she was always this bad person. And in the end of the movie wasn't like, we just had to sit down and talk it out. We just needed to blah, 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 which it sounded like Jen was like, what if they just sat down and talked it out? I was like, great, that's good. Like, these people who are in these positions don't learn, and they don't necessarily change. So good. I like that. She stays the sort of antagonist the whole way through, even with those moments of vulnerability. So I get that people might be like, oh, so now you give her like that time, that moment of like self-awareness and that moment of sort of outreach to Nigel especially, but even like some softer moments with Andy, that it's a little bit, I wouldn't go so far as say a betrayal, but a little bit of like, okay, like we gave you the like medicine last time, like here you came back 20 years later, here you go, here's your slice of cake, you get to enjoy dessert, and be like, she can soften a little bit, and she can maybe have had some of that outreach and had some of that connection. I think they do a pretty good job of at the end still making it seem like she's like, why is this person bothering me? Like, why am I being talked to? Like, she hasn't really like changed that much. And so it's less of like a big character switch or evolution, and more just like similar to when she talks about, like, she is open and revealing in the first movie about, I'm getting a divorce and now they're going to talk about me. They're going to sell all these tabloids and this is awful. And like, what do I say to my kids? And like, there's a real sort of human moment there, that in this time we get a real human moment, and it's her connecting with Nigel. And so that's nice. So I was a little bit more like, okay, she gets to be nice. But it sold, it landed. I was in on it. Like, I think it worked, and it was nice. And it was nice that they got to sort of have that. And he got to be sort of lifted up a little bit. And that also meant it paid off even more, to Greg's point, when he was just sort of like, who's the puppeteer? Like, I've been controlling all of this. I've been in the shadows, like pulling the strings. Don't worry about it. And that was fun. That was good.
I thought it was especially clever because I really felt towards the beginning of the movie that I was like, this is all very well thought out. And clearly a bunch of people sat in a room and mapped this out on a whiteboard to be like, how can we get Andy back at Runway?
Yeah.
And it felt very like calculated, but also at the same time felt so contrived. Not in a way that wasn't believable, but in a way that was like too believable. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, so many things. And in particular, that sequence where they're like texting back, and like all the text messages are flying around and people are looking at their phones, looking at the news stories. And it's like, well, how about we take this person and completely put them back in the, like, in that moment, I was like, oh, we're working really hard to make the plot premise of this make sense. And so I actually thought it was a clever meta moment at the end where it's like, of course, that didn't make any sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and Nigel sort of makes fun of Andy to be like, did you really think this just like randomly landed in your lap for no reason? Which is what I was thinking.
Like, what a random happenstance. That wouldn't be an inciting incident. That would be wild.
But like, yeah. I agree with that criticism of the opening, and it felt like rushed, but at the same time I was like, all of these things have happened. Like, we have real world examples of all of them. And I was like, I totally buy this. Like, of course, like, that's just how we have to get them back together. But they could have done way worse, right? It could have been so much more ham-fisted, and this was pretty clever. And I mean, that to me is part of the beauty of just having a new story to tell about journalism. Cause like, that happens all the time where it's like, we're in trouble, hire big name and just plug them in and see what they do to fix it. And it just really worked.
And all to Greg's point earlier of like, it didn't really cross my mind in the moment. And it certainly wasn't sticking an hour and 45 minutes later when we get to that point at the end of the movie, that like, it does make sense in the context of the rest of the plot that it was just a random capricious decision by the rich owner to be like, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to fix this problem because I'm a man of action and I'm going to disrupt things by throwing these people together. Okay, goodbye. Like, figure it out. That like does fit in with a lot of the other sort of critiques of how like the powerful are in charge of stuff. And, it's at their whim of whether they're going to be benevolent and hands off, or they're going to get involved and start to mess around with things. And yeah, it's just these industries that are important or are fashion are going to be like impacted by this. That was a slam on fashion compared to journalism. Sorry. I respect people like fashion. Like Greg, our editor.
On behalf of fashion, I accept your apology.
So I want to, because we're already kind of talking about this a little bit, I want to skip ahead to the question I had about the representation of Miranda as a character in this. And yeah, I also listened to a little bit of The Big Picture, and their big complaint, I think, was, well, Miranda doesn't get to be as bad, and she's not as fun. Like, she's kind of like, the word I used in our outline is defanged. Like, she has a lot less power in this story than she does in the first one. Did you feel like did that bother you at all? Or did you feel like it made sense? I actually saw it as kind of a positive for reasons I'll get into in a minute, but I want to hear from you in terms of how you felt about that. Like, I guess the first question is, do you agree with that assessment that doesn't get to be as zingery or as mean in this movie? And if you do agree with that, do you feel like it was that was a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think that yes, that's definitely true, but I think it's the opposite of a problem. I think that like that's part of what saves the movie from feeling like, remember this? Like we're doing it
Yep.
again. Like here come the zingers, here come the things that she says. Like there's enough in there, and I actually like the way they handled that dynamic. I did not see the new season of Scrubs, but I'm not. That makes sense. The Bill Lawrence and the people behind Scrubs are also very thoughtful in terms of how to set things up, and the idea of time has passed, things have changed, and like she starts to say things, and her assistant is like let's try to avoid the HR complaints. I just thought it made a lot of sense. The assistant was the person doing that because it's like
Okay.
her job
That's
is
what
to
she needs
facilitate.
assistance
Yeah,
with.
her job is to facilitate and make her day run as smoothly as possible. And avoiding problems with HR is like one of her top priorities now, I would assume. And so that made sense that she was like, no, like try to bring it down. Let's I thought that we
Also makes sense, real quick. Also makes sense that she would want to outsource that decision making to somebody else. Like she doesn't want to have to
Yes.
think about what am I
Smart.
not supposed to say and what am I supposed to say before she says something. She just needs someone to be like, stop. Like,
So I think that was funny. I mean, and obviously it would have been great to get like more barbs, more from just Meryl Streep enjoying the role. But I do think the movie was ultimately more interesting that we are coming into it with her in such a lower power position compared to where she was in the first movie. So yeah, I mean, it's a problem if it's one of those. It's weird because it's I am confident a lot of the people who would say like, well, this is a bit of an issue, are also people who would be like, I don't want the same thing over and over. I want it to sort of grow and evolve. It's got shades of they ruined the character of Luke Skywalker to keep making this about Star Wars. We're recording on May 5th. We're just off of May 4th, everybody. We're doing the best we can to not make it all about Star Wars. But it's a little shade of it, just sort of like, I want this to not be the exact same, but I also don't like any changes. Where it's like, if I think it's better if it's changed, but maybe I'm just that's, people want different things from these movies, but I think that was a good thing.
I think it was the right call. So this is so stupid. Probably Jen will have to cut this out. But like there was this convoluted thing that happened in my hometown one time where unfortunately an elderly woman got in a car accident and killed somebody, and she lost her license. And so my hometown was very small, and the old woman had to be driven by the police down to the grocery store. And they did that. And I was the cashier at the grocery store. And then there was a police call, and the police drove off. And I had to take this old woman home. And this like really like tender old woman was sitting in my car, horribly embarrassed that now this know nothing teenager had to drive her home, and like obviously upset about what had happened, all of this. And then when we're driving home, she's like, I just feel like I'm a caged lion. Like they're so afraid of me, and they're so, I didn't mean to. And like, I'm a dumb 16-year-old. I'm like, yeah, man, I think you are like that. And it was like it was like a half-hour drive back to her house. Probably not that long, like 20 minutes. So like I actually in the theater thought about that woman, and it felt to me that's what they were going for with Miranda, is that I do think there's this natural life stage later in life where you are still vibrant and still knowledgeable, but the world starts treating you with kid gloves for whatever reason. That was obviously a very specific set of circumstances, but it's like, I think the Miranda character is being presented as somebody who is still respected, but is not actually respected anymore, right? Like it's both at the same time. It's a respect, but it's a muted respect. It's the cage around the lion. And so I think you both just recovered the assistant part to me. I like both of your explanations of that, but also like it just felt like this is a type you see in the workplace where it's somebody who is not maybe not as sharp, maybe not as powerful as they once were. And so they are kind of pushed to the side and treated like they are delicate in a way they don't deserve. And I did like it overall. I think they dialed it up a little too far. The scene where Miranda can apparently not put a coat on a hanger. Goes a little too far. Like it's funny when the assistant says, like, "Can you believe I heard a rumor she used to throw her coat at people?" But then to imagine that she spent like 10 years and not figured out the inner workings of a hanger as somebody in the fashion industry, like, makes absolutely no sense. But I mean, you get Meryl Streep doing a little physical comedy, so it's worth it in a little bit. But it was like, all right, like let's be careful and not, because back to PT's comments, that's where when it becomes a caricature, I think it's there. And I think, I'm proud of this movie as a proud fashion editor for not pushing it towards the internet, because it would have been easy to just hunt for more Miranda memes. And I don't think you're going to get a lot of Miranda memes out of this. You'll get funny things, and I'm sure the internet will find things. But like, that would have been terrible. And I think a lesser screenplay would have aimed at that, as lots of television and movies do.
So the thing I'll add to that, because I agree with everything you just said, but I think it's also kind of like an external pressure is the wrong word, but there are external factors that are taking power away from Miranda, right? It's the idea that she is powerless because the Runway as a magazine now has to exist in this world where it's completely at the mercy of advertisers, and it is under threat in terms of being eliminated or downsized, and that other people now, because of the way the industry has changed, have all the power that she once had, right? Because it's like that scene where they go into and they that, like, we meet the Emily Blunt character again, right? And then because she's the head of Dior, and she's like, these are the things that I want, and Miranda just says, okay, we'll get right on that. And then Andy, meanwhile, is like, what is happening right now? Like, what is she, like, her reaction is so funny, because she's like, this is not the Miranda that I remember. And she's like, what? Well, like, why did you just let them tell you what to do? And her response was like, because I have no choice. Like, because there's no us without them. We're completely at their mercy because of financial reasons, right? And that's the same thing when she's talking to, whether it's the Benji Barnes character or I cannot remember his name now, which is terrible, the Irv's son, the BJ Novak character. Whenever she's talking to them, it's a similar thing where she has no power in that situation, right? So she can't actually be herself, the version of herself. Jay, thank you. When she's talking to, and when she's talking to either of them, because they hold all the power, because they have all the money and the financial leverage, it's like actively stifling who she could be. And I did like appreciate as a counterbalance that the times we do see her be kind of the old Miranda are in the rooms where she still has power, right? When she's talking to the other employees about like how the look book is going to get set up, or like, that's where you see her kind of reasserting her old self. And so I thought actually it was like worked really well for the story they were trying to tell in terms of the larger shift in like magazines and industry and all that kind of stuff.
Jen, I want you to get first crack at this just to extend the conversation a little bit. Kenneth Branagh is in this movie, which was a shock to me when the opening credits roll, and I was like, "Whoa, wait, did that just say my guy from what was his movie?" The joke's ruined because I can't remember. Belfast.
Belfast, yeah.
Mr. Belfast himself
Murder
coming to the rest. So, what did you think about that relationship? What did you think about the fact they got one of the world's most famous actors to have a pretty minor role, like
to play a violin and walk a dog? That's basically all he does in the movie. Yeah, I mean, like, so what was nice, and again, I think this goes back to what we're complimenting the movie for in terms of it being dynamic in its storytelling and being willing to kind of change things from the original. I think yes, like, it is kind of silly that they hired Kenneth Branagh to do this role, and it's kind of a nothing role. But at the same time, when we do see him interact with Miranda, I think it's a matter of recognizing the difference between how he interacts with her versus the husband that was in the other movie, right? And I think like he is nothing but supportive, and it really feels like she has found someone who understands her, understands what she needs, and is just going to be like, you know what, it's fine. Like, can I get your slippers? Can I, right? Like, I don't mean to say that like he's subservient to her or something like that, but you know what I mean? Like, but he is supportive emotionally in a way that it seems like she never had probably before. And so I actually kind of liked that. The idea that like, it just was a matter. It was like, yes, she did terrible things in the first movie, but part of the problem was just that like, she never had anyone recognize that her ambitions were valid, and kind of supporting her and her work in a way that she actually wanted. Same, you could say the same thing about Andy in the first movie, right? So I really like that. I like the fact that he was just like a supportive, loving spouse who was just like, I get it.
It also was a good way of, in a very sort of show don't tell component of the movie, to be like, oh, why is Miranda a little different now? It's like, oh, because she has a stable home life
Yeah.
that, like, is working fine. And he's not like waiting around for her, mad that she has like a late night thing, because he's off doing violin stuff somewhere, or he's not, and he's just kind of hanging out being like, yeah, whatever. You do your thing. So yeah, I mean, I also think that, who was the guy who played her husband in the first movie? I have no idea, but like, it's some guy, and it's like, you want to believe there's someone who is a match for a Meryl Streep character. It's like, oh, maybe you need someone like Kenneth Branagh to be like, yeah, they could hang, with this person. So I think there's something to that. It is a little bit of, he's just sort of like, he's maybe two dimensional and just sort of like, I'm here to function, but like, the function makes sense, I think. And I didn't necessarily mind that. I think there was a degree of me assuming when he first shows up and you first see him, I forget if it's when Andy goes to the house. No, it must be early. It must be at the party, where she's like, I just listened to all your quartet, and I think you're great. I only just heard about it because I just got invited. Like, that's fine that it's like, oh, it's Kenneth Branagh. He's gonna do something shady. Like, there's some reason why we've cast him in this part, and I kind of like that. It's just kind of like, nah, he's just a guy, really supportive. He goes, does his own thing, shows up, offers support, be like, you do whatever you got to do. Like, all right, I'm gonna go to bed. Like, that's fine. I don't know. It was a misdirect. It was one of those things where it's like both an explanation of the evolution of her character without like, over explicating it and banging you over the head with it, and also a little bit of a misdirect because we are used to thinking like, oh, this person's too famous to be in this role, this like thankless small role, and it's like, not Kenneth Branagh. Kenneth Branagh will gladly be unthanked in a movie if you give him enough of a paycheck so we can go do a Shakespeare play somewhere in the Midlands. He's happy to be there.
Well, you both made me think it's actually very much the same as Jennifer Connelly in Top Gun Maverick, where it's like, hey, what if we put one of the most beautiful humans here and they were just a great person and were like so cool that you would be like, it would be a dream to be married or dating them. And it's like, yeah, I think this is the equivalent of that kind of way too cool, way too nice, totally works. And it's just fun to see him show up. I especially when he shows up without a mustache on. I'm here for it.
I could keep talking about the like because like the I feel like the rom-com factor, which Greg and I had talked about extensively in our other episode, actually feel this movie feels like a rebuttal to what we were complaining about in the first movie, in terms of like, man, like none of these guys get it, right? Like they're all terrible. and and this movie, like, because what the conversation we're having about Kenneth Branagh is also making me think about unknown Australian actor. I don't know, like, who is this guy?
Colin from accounting.
So yeah, I want to note, yeah, he is not Colin from Accounts. This is a very important distinction. If you have watched the show, which I don't know if anyone has, but it is a great little Australian show that this guy, whose name, of course, we all know, and I'm not struggling to try to look up, Patrick Brommel. Colin from Accounts is the name of the dog that's the central connecting point between his character and the main female character, who is his real life wife. And they connect over needing to take care of this random stray dog, and they named the dog Colin from Accounts because they think that would be a funny name, and that's how they meet. And then it's one of those like a 3-year 12-episode TV show that's like the British Australian model, but it's really funny and he's great. And I think a lot of people don't like this guy in this movie because he's not needed, because every scene of his could be cut out and nothing would be changed for the rest of the movie. But I love him from that show, and I thought every like little quip he had was amusing, at least, and I thought he had chemistry with Anne Hathaway, and so a lot of people don't like him, but he's great, and he is kind of a nobody. He is in something else.
Apparently he's a voice on Bluey. It's just like every Australian person in
Oh
Bluey.
yes, he was in the Netflix show Evil. I think that's on Netflix, or was it on Amazon? He was on the show Evil as one of the characters. I have not seen that, but he's apparently on that, and that's where other people would know him from. If you have not watched Colin from Accounts, which really everybody should do, because I recommend that show.
All right. Well, so again, I think the point, I agree. I like once the second you said you could cut out all his scenes, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's true. But I do feel like he is also another example, again, as a counterexample to the men in the first movie. It's like, hey, maybe the problem is not that you're trying to do too much or that you're trying to work, like achieve your dreams and have a career. Maybe it's just that you have to find like a partner that is actually like supportive of that.
A decent
what a
person.
novel concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a nice person and like understanding and supportive. So I think for that reason alone, it's a net positive. Also the bit about do I have to go say hi to Hugh Jackman, I thought was very funny.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
The fight they have is probably the like sweatiest part of the movie in terms of like, oh, we just need them to sort of break up right now. And like, it just didn't exactly like the exchange and the elevation of like annoyance at each other, like that didn't really work. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh, this probably should have been like 2 minutes longer to like let that build in a way that made sense. But then they were like, we don't have time for that. Let's just get to where he's like, actually, am I not the same as a billionaire? And she's like, no, like what you do is bad. He's like, well, I'm leaving. It's like, all right, whatever. But that part wasn't very good. And that's probably why people are mostly kind of annoyed at him. But it also feels like that wasn't necessary, because it could have just been like, I got to go out of town. Like, we just met. I'll talk to you when I get back. And they don't need to have actually fought. And
that was the main thing that felt like checking the plot box.
Right.
To echo the original in a way that didn't really make sense, and to be like, well, she has to have a guy that she has a fight with and breaks up with before she goes to Europe, and then well, but I guess like when she gets there isn't like another person who she might be, so that part I guess doesn't repeat. But you know what I mean, like
it's Miranda Priestley. That's the other person she might commit her life to.
I mean, we talked about it a lot in the first movie, but the scene where the two of them are in the town car at the end is pretty close to a like, we're gonna be together. And
yeah,
I actually, the point about Miranda Priestley being a little too nice, that scene I thought was a good mix of like, I'm excited, we're gonna be working together, but like, it's still temporary. Like it will eventually end, and it's not. And I liked that didn't end up being the like equivalent of a rom-com marriage. It's like, we're going to work on this and we're going to figure it out together, but we'll also, probably eventually break up, but that's cool.
I also like that she sort of forced her to admit, don't say you did this for me. You did this for you. It's very much like the Walter White and Breaking Bad moment of like, I did this for myself kind of thing. Whereas like they've been protesting too much that it was to save this other person or for the benefit of these other people. So I like that too. And I like how she's like, no, you should still write the book. Yeah. That whole last scene was very well written. I felt like, cause it covered a lot. It kind of satisfied the plot need for having that and gave us closure and resolution, but at the same time, maintain the integrity of these characters and their relationship to each other. Like you get the sense that she's like, just because I'm saying this now, don't think that I'm going to take it any easier on you once we get back to the office. You know what I mean? Like I believed that from from coming away from that scene. So,
yeah.
So I do want to talk before we move into maybe rhetorical situation, because we have actually already dug into a lot of the themes of this movie and what it's kind of trying to say. But before we kind of do that more, I want to talk about the cameo factor, which PT I think alluded to, because like the first movie doesn't actually have any famous fashion people in it. And this movie is just like a constant parade of not only fashion people, but just like famous people. Like John Baptiste is in this movie. Like that dinner scene is just like, I was like, I would go back and rewatch it just for that, just to pause it and be like, who are all these people? I'm sure I missed a bunch.
A lot of journalists too are in that, right? Kara Swisher's there, and I think Molly Jong-Fast is there too. Is it Jong or Young? I think I've only read her name.
Yeah,
I think it's Jong.
I don't know either.
But like Zendaya's stylist, was it La Roche, I think is his name, has a cameo in this. There's so many cameos. Like I think Donatella Versace is at the table in the restaurant with.
She has lines.
Yep. She's a part.
So, for frequent listener Hasib, we need to mention Karl Anthony Towns, who is a New York Knicks player who's at the party, and I know he was very excited.
Definitely knew that was a Knicks player because we love you, Hasib. So we were both.
I mean,
We
were
honestly,
definitely don't want the Knicks to lose as soon as possible in the playoffs. Sorry, Hasib.
Sports reference.
Hey.
Oh my God. So, I mean, like half of these cameos, I was like, that looks like someone I should know who it is, but I don't know who it is. Like that was just my experience watching this. But do you feel like it was distracting? Did it work? Does it just make sense? Because since the first movie, this has become so popular. I don't know. Like, what do you think that part of the movie worked? There's also a very big cameo that was actually kept pretty well secret, I think. At the end, Lady Gaga actually has a scene.
Potential featured performer LTR nominee. Lady Gaga.
Really good.
She's a great little snappy performance.
Her like,
so
who let her in here?
Because I knew Gaga was going to be in this movie because Jen told me, right? Didn't you bring that up?
No. Okay, so shows how much you were paying attention. I said that she wrote a song.
Okay.
For the movie and did a music video. I did not say at the time. I did not know because I hadn't seen this. I didn't know she was actually going to be in the movie. Although once they revealed that she was the one where they were like, well, we don't have a musician because of the budget cuts or whatever, or like, who was it? Like John Legend wanted his piano flown in or something like that, right? Yeah. And then they were like, well, we could ask. And she's like, no. Right. And I really, I felt really dumb to be like, oh, of course it's Lady Gaga. She did a song for this movie. Like, why wouldn't they have her in this movie?
Yeah.
So I felt kind of silly for not predicting that, but I was surprised. And
I did listen to you. I knew all that. I guess it just, as soon as it came up, because they say maybe just before that, they're like, and it's set up for a musical guest. I'm like, oh, it's going to be the person who has an original song nominee from this.
Makes sense.
So to get to the heart of your question, I actually think maybe Gaga, her scene was fine, but it felt a little like, oh, wouldn't it be really funny that Gaga and Miranda Priestley have a beef, or have beef? Have beef is the correct colloquial use of that. Yeah. Jen is so mad at me right now.
Like conceptually, it's beef. No. It's not a numeration of beefs that could be added up.
I thought it was the other way around, but anyway, okay. Because you say like, what's your beef? That's what people say, right? Like, we've spent too long talking about this.
The most millennial conversation that has ever occurred. So I actually think that one, I thought the little mini scene was a little too much. If she had just come out and sang, and I am a firm believer in the Oscar nominee movie should be actually in the movie. So I was glad that even if it was kind of a setup, but that she was actually singing the song in the actual show. I found a lot of the other ones silly. It was like, who has money and wants to get in? And so the fashion ones, my understanding, mainly from that Big Picture episode PT and I both listened to, is that nobody wanted to participate in the first because they were all afraid of Anna Wintour, and that she would hate the first movie and like blacklist anybody associated with it. And so the fact that, she embraced this movie, and it made me remember that she was at the Oscars and had a pretty good bit with Anne Hathaway as far as Oscar podium bits go. So it was, to me, a little distracting, but also like, I mean, the Met Gala was last night, and like, what did we see today except every famous person in the world in that room? So like, yeah, it only makes sense that these people would be circulating with Miranda. And I am not as in tune with the fashion world that it really confused me. The one I bumped on for whatever reason was Jenna Bush. I was like, oh, like, okay, the Today Show anchor is like, I mean, I get that she's of those bushes, but like, I was like, okay, I guess she's famous enough for this.
Oh, that's an interesting, like, who wouldn't make the cut? Who do you think it's like inaccurate that would make it? Yeah. I did look it up. Apparently it's a shift in the grammar, starting in the 70s, to go from a beef or an enumeration of beefs to beef being a mass noun, where it's just, you have beef. That's according to one website that I've never heard of before. And so of course it must be correct. The internet is never wrong. But yeah, I basically was going to say the things that Greg was going to say, which I was going to steal from the Big Picture, which is that like, it is partly almost a meta commentary on the loss of power of the real life version of Miranda Priestley, that suddenly all these people will be like, yeah, I'll be in this movie. I don't have to be afraid of the negative backlash, combined with the knowledge there won't be negative backlash because this person is, has embraced it and has said like, yeah, great. They're fine with it. Although then it's also chicken egg. Did they embrace it because it's a foothold into culture and society that maybe they didn't need before, but now it's kind of helpful for them. It's actually interesting, and mentioning the Met Gala, there was a lot of pushback on this year's Met Gala because it was co-hosted or co-sponsored by, I don't know exactly how it all works, by the Bezoses, by Jeff Bezos and his current wife. And I would be interested to see if any of the people were had full awareness of the script and were like, oh, this movie is about how awful rich oligarchs are, like Jeff Bezos. And they were like, wait a minute, hold on now. I don't know if I want to piss him off. But maybe he's so rich he doesn't even need to bother being pissed off by something like this. I don't think his skin is necessarily thick, but it's not as thin as some other of our famous billionaires who get really mad all the time about things bad being said about them. But yeah, it's interesting how it has shifted from you need to be aware of Anna Wintour and how she might react to this to potentially you need to be aware of these tech oligarchs who are buying up all the things like Condé Nast, like the Washington Post, like whatever, who are really making the decisions. And then apparently that wasn't an issue, at least not for these people. They didn't feel as connected to it. So that combined with it's a legacy sequel to a very hit movie that's got a lot of cultural traction, probably a lot easier to get people to show up. But yeah, I think it all made sense in the world. There's a little bit of it's just like when it's like, we're going to look at all the nice clothes now for like a minute while we get little like montages of stuff playing out. It was also like, look at all these famous people. Like that's part of the montage of setting into, this world, and that Andy is suddenly being thrust into this level of conversation with Miranda and these other people. Like it tracked, it all made sense. It didn't feel like too egregious. It all made sense, I thought.
I want to pick on the Bezos point because we haven't said his name. Justin Theroux is ridiculous in this movie in a like totally endearing way as a parody of a Bezos. I don't know. He kind of had Wozniak vibes to me. That might have just been like the styling and the voice he went with, but was like wild. And like it's very funny because he looks totally unattractive and you're like, that's Justin Theroux, one of the most attractive actors out there, also the screenwriter of Iron Man 2, which I will never not bring up when he comes up because it's an insane fact to me. But he I liked how much he committed to his ridiculous character and always just felt like that kind of tech billionaire. Like it just worked really well. And then the relationship he's in with Emily and how that's a blah, blah, blah. It all totally works. So yeah.
The writing around his character and the Jay character, the BJ Novak character, I thought was really spot on to the point where like my skin started to crawl. Like, so the best one I think for Benji Barnes is when he's like, "Oh, I'm trying to be at a water deficit right now."
An aqua deficit, yeah,
yeah, aqua deficit. Yeah, that was really funny. And then all of the like really hyper aggressive language, like the thing in the trailer, I think is where he's like, we're just gonna get in the end zone, and she's like, the end zone, that's so well put, right? Like being so sarcastic. But every time he opened his mouth and started talking about like, we're gonna do this, and here like everyone sync together. I think he responds to something by saying, I am aligned.
Yep.
It's just like, ugh, like I just so I just wanted to say that the caricature or the parody, whatever you want to call it, the characterization of those billionaire characters were really good.
And when with that also their sort of supporting team of the McKinsey consultants who come in and they're just like, we're going to strategize all of the alignments of whatever. It's just like, oh yeah, like those are the people who come in and make all these terrible decisions and give the foundation for just like gut everything to maximize the profits at the very top. And then we'll move on to the next thing and do the same.
It reminded me of what we had said about Emma Stone's character in Begonia.
Mm-hmm.
Right, how she's like, we just need to dialogue about this. Like, it's like the corporate speak is so well written. Anyway,
it's weird because we work at universities. I don't know why we would know so much about corporate speak. That's odd, but I guess we're just well read.
So, where do you want? Do we want to go to rhetorical situations since we're kind of already talking about the tech billionaire? Like, yeah, let's just do it. We get to the heart of this. So this is going to be, I think, a half rhetorical situation, half thesis plays. But I'll intro it like it's.
remix.
Yeah, what's the mashup of the two? But anyway, this is a rhetorical situation, a segment in which we look at a film through the lens of our academic experience. So the segue from PT could not have been better. So all four of our regular co-hosts are writing professors. We like to have this section of the episode dedicated to making connections to our experience as scholars and teachers in the teaching of writing. The rhetorical situation refers to any contextual factors that influence composing and interpretation. So the thing I thought was kind of the obvious one is just like what this movie is trying to say about modernity and culture and the future in particular. There's the really, like, to me, terrifying monologue that Benji Barnes has to Miranda about what the future, how we should deal with the future and where the world is going, and how kind of like art and history are passe and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's a lot of things going on here. So I'll just open it up. Like, what did you feel like that theme worked for you? What was the movie actually trying to say about that? Is this movie actually like a going to be, in the future, like a good kind of temporal record of like how people are feeling, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Talk to me about technology, like tech billionaires and AI and art and culture and all that kind of stuff.
I think this movie had a nice, strong position about the fact that we have, over the last 20 years, we'll just go with 20 since that's the time of the first movie till now, really just allowed art and culture to be corporatized further and further and further, so that now the greatest fashion editor in the world, her aspiration is to become senior content manager at a global scale. And to me, like, that's one of the best examples of that corporate speak PT was talking about, where it's like, that's something that Miranda Priestley aspires to, is horrifying and really upsetting in a lot of ways. And so I thought that this was one of the most anti-corporate movies I'd seen in a little while, with the exception, and I want to put this out there because it's absolutely related, go see I Love Boosters in a week or two, because it's very much in the same vein and working on the same areas. So I thought that it was successful in that regard. And I do, to your last question, I think this would be a very clear portrait of what it's like to live in the 2020s. And it's this moment where we've let it all go so far. And I think a lot of us are hopeful the pendulum might start to swing back away from the tech bros. It's not looking great at the moment, but it does feel like there's at least an increasing awareness, particularly within the last year, which makes it pretty impressive that, this was filming, I'm sure, when a lot of these events were happening, that the over technocratic, like, let's just logic our way in like systems out of our problems, is being reduced to a parody of itself. And the actions of some of these tech bros is now like front and center. Whereas, 2 years ago, they were behind the scenes manipulating everything. Now, whatever they do is out in public. And I think we're ready for that pushback. And does that actually mean magazines are going to be saved? I strongly doubt it. I mean, I've thought with my students a lot lately about how the internet is a terrible place now. Have you been to an actual website lately? It's awful. Like, whatever website you go to, I put...
except not the longtake.substack.com, a great website that only has human-made content.
But when you go, like, if you actually want to visit the website of a magazine, it's like 5 different panels open up as ads in pop-ups form, but they're not pop-ups because we block those. And it's like everything is so terrible on the internet. And this kind of felt like almost a fantasy in that regard. Wouldn't it be nice if we claimed art and culture back for ourselves, and we committed, if not in a print magazine form, but, actually, and PT's joke was spot on, but also like the move of very talented, smart journalists to Substack is a part of that. And Jen did not start out at some soulless magazine. She's always been there. She's a Substack originalist. But like the fact that we're seeing all the talent and all the, like, if I talk to like the cool hipster parents waiting outside pickup, it's about, did you read this Substack? Did you read this one? Right? It's not about like a magazine or a feature in the New Yorker anymore or anything like that. So I think this is dead on about being 2026, and that again is something I did not expect as I walked into Devil Wears Prada 2.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and what you were saying made me realize like one of the things I really liked about a key moment that we already mentioned, which is that conversation between Benji and Miranda in the chapel where the Last Supper is, that is apparently right outside a marketplace in Milan. That was a little dicey. I don't know about that, but whatever. I'm sure it's there. I'm sure it's nearby, and somehow Miranda got to a big market. But that's fine. But that they're there and they're having this conversation that I was like, it's really smart that they made Benji's like clear villain monologue moment not be so extreme as to be unbelievable. And I'm wondering if I thought that because reality has gotten so extreme that when they wrote it, they were like, this is going to be wild. Like no one's going to believe how crazy this is. And in a post Doge world, it's just sort of like, oh yeah, that's what those guys think. Like they all think that, like that idea of we're looking to the future and we're going to build new things is like inherently built on the idea that everything that came before is useless and worthless and should be destroyed or should just be ignored. Like who cares? Like this guy painted the Last Supper. Like so what? Like we're gonna build a robot dog that's gonna run around stuff. Like that's what matters. That's what humanity is moving forward and finding something new. And it's like, oh yeah, that sucks. Like it's too bad that like we didn't realize that for so long, or at least I didn't realize that for so long until these last few years when it like this sort of coarsening and shifting and kind of calcifying of the perspectives of the very, very rich and the very powerful in the tech world like circled all around and leaned to this culturally regressive zone where it was just like, but we'll control. We don't need to care about people or humanity or culture because we're going to move forward and set things the way we think they should be done, which means that they get everything and everyone else gets nothing, which didn't seem to be the way of a technocratic like dream a decade ago. But yeah, so I think that that's captured really well, and in that sense does capture 2026. And I don't know how intentional that was, because again, maybe it was meant to be more satirically over the top, but like reality has surpassed it. But I will also say, I think that this commentary, I appreciated how much of this commentary about oligarchs, especially tech oligarchs, and the malicious indifference of them on about things like this, because they think art and culture doesn't matter. And so they'll just be like, oh yeah, like my girlfriend wants to run this, so I'm going to buy it for her and she'll run it, or, whatever. And like even kind of the Lucy Liu, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, whose name I don't remember, in real life, that like she's based on, it's like it's great that she's well intentioned, but they are clear in that town car scene between Miranda and Andy at the end where it's like, yeah, this sounds good for now until she decides she does want to meddle and does get involved, that it's all very much just at the whims of the very rich. And we just hope that we have a sponsor and a patron who will not get in our way for a little while, and we can work and then deal with it when they do become a nuisance, a meddler. All the good people at the Washington Post are learning about this in the last couple of years, that like, this is a real issue, that this was the goal of this movie. I am confident the writer and the director were like, this is what we want to talk about. And everything else in the movie is almost like extends out from that. So this softening of Miranda we were talking about, this kind of like updating of the culture, like is partially to be funny and because 20 years have gone by and that's interesting and make it a little bit different and blah, blah, blah. But it's also like, if you had the 2006 version of Runway and that toxic work environment, and you're like, but this is pure and good compared to the McKinsey billionaire consultant people, you would be like, I don't know, maybe the AI version of this would be better because people are being hurt here. So like they needed to make things nicer in Runway and more of like, we're actually trying to like just, we're clinging to this life raft together and we're trying to move forward, to make it this sort of humanity versus the technocracy hellscape that is being pitched and being sort of like put into place. And that leads to that final shot of the three of them in the offices being this triumphant, positive thing instead of this like dungeon they're trapped in under the thumb of Miranda Priestley, and how like, they're going to be perpetually in the agony of a mean boss. So it's a really interesting like move. It's a really interesting way of approaching this. And it like there's this I forget when we may have talked about this in the past, but I know I've brought it up, where there's this like weird little grouping of movies in like the late 80s, early 90s. Sorry, Greg. Where a movie got really successful and they went back and they were like, we love Gremlins. Can you just make a sequel to Gremlins? You can do whatever you want, but like, please, we just want a sequel to Gremlins. And Joe Dante was like, okay. And he just made a Looney Tunes movie, like in the guise of Gremlins. And then like the people behind Bill and Ted made a pastiche of like weird European movies as the sequel to Bill and Ted. And it was just like, yeah, whatever you want. Tim Burton made Batman Returns. And it was just like, you could do whatever you want. And he's like, whatever I want. And he made this crazy movie that like is the most Tim Burton movie ever, because he had $100 million to make it, or however much money a blockbuster was then budget wise. It feels like, and I want to give their names, director David Frankel and writer Aline Brosh McKenna, also the creator and showrunner of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which I have not seen, but have only heard good things about. That they just
the actress was here, right?
She was the working in the publishing world, trying to get the Miranda book. So yeah, it just feels like they were just like, we can do whatever we want. Cool. We want to talk about media consolidation and the disintegration of these important core artistic and cultural institutions in our society at the hands of simple-minded business people and technocrats who want to destroy things. And Disney was like, sure, whatever, here's your check, like please make sure Meryl Streep and Stanley Tucci are in it, thanks, bye.
And, hey, just have them hold some Starbucks and Diet Cokes, we're cool, right?
Yeah.
So the main thing I want to add to this, right, to bring it back to my own experience as a teacher, is the factor of the attention economy. So a big part that we haven't really talked about is not only is journalism dying, or Andy has that meltdown in her apartment about like, and it's very good. I feel like I'm like, Anne Hathaway's earning her check here, where she's just like, why do we have to do it this way? And I feel like her storyline as a journalist is really about that people, it's not just the financial machinations and the oligarchy and the technocrats, whatever, right? It's not all the stuff it is part of that, but it's also on us that like no one's reading her articles, even though they're very good. Right. And that, part of it is the system, the currency of the system is the attention, right? Like of like what's getting clicks. And this is something I've actually had to talk to my students about, because we do usually at least one assignment where they have to be writing for a popular audience. And the big thing that I try to teach them is like, look, when someone doesn't have a reason to read what you've written, it completely changes the way that you write it, right? In terms of like, you have to get their attention. You have to hold their attention. You have to make the case for why something is worth their free time, and that they shouldn't just scroll past it, right? And it opens up a really interesting conversation usually, where students like hadn't thought about this before and hadn't thought about their own reading habits, in terms of like, because I asked them like, what makes you click on something instead of scrolling past it? And why is that, right? Like, and so I feel like the movie is also kind of getting at this core problem of like, and part of it is like, because all three of us are, writers, English majors, writing teachers, etc. Like part of it's like wistful, like, why don't people read anymore? Like, why don't people read books, or why don't they like good writing, or, you know what I mean? Like if that's there's kind of an elitist impulse at the heart of that for sure. But at the same time, it's not wrong in terms of like, these articles are really high quality, but the way that it's being judged is by how many people have clicked on it and read it. And so a big critique of Andy is like, well, what are you doing to like get more clicks? What are you doing to engage people? Like I think the word they use is engagement, right? Like the engagement is low. So inevitably that kind of like force it. And Andy makes jokes about this throughout, where she's like, yes, I'm still writing about like enzyme peels and like things that aren't like, like important issues necessarily, right? She's being forced to like commercialize her writing to attract more attention and get more people to read it, and it's not about the quality, right? Like, so that's mostly to say that like I deeply felt the lamenting of that in this movie, because it's something I have to deal with and think about and teach to my students and all that sort of stuff. So there's no question in there necessarily, but that's my.
No, well, that doesn't have to be.
But it reinforces your point that it's very 2026, right?
Yes.
I just don't want that point to be lost. That if this is what you're teaching and thinking about, then it absolutely will be a good record of this time.
And I think there's also, it's the curse of part of what is like, feels so sad. And those sections of the movie is being like, oh, Miranda Priestley's looking at the metrics of like who is reading,
right.
or at least being told that it's like, she's the tastemaker who is supposed to be like deciding this is the thing. And this is like, the people in this room decided the color of your sweater 4 years ago, whatever that sequence is from the original movie. It's like, well, now instead it's like, we're trying to figure out like what articles you're going to have based on all this information. And it is this sort of shift from a sort of subjective human based existence and reality and culture to trying to get some sort of quantifiable way of understanding it, which is very corporate, very tech based, and very just sort of like, I mean, we're in education, so like that's standardized tests, that's all this stuff that we're always like, oh god, like, sorry, you learned the 5-paragraph essay because that's what you needed to do to write on your SATs and your state level standardized test. Now that you've mastered that, never do that again. It's awful. It sucks. We all know it sucks. And your high school teachers knew it too, but they made you do it because that's what the metric said had to be done. And now we have to like, program everything. And yeah, it's just it's a very wayward approach to society, and it touches in lots of different areas. And, this is the fact that that's so prevalent is why there is this number of people that are just like, oh, it's great. Like, we can just make it even more efficient. Like, I don't have to read this article. I can get chat to give me a summary of this article, and I can only read 1 paragraph. And then I can read 10 articles in the time it would take me to read 1. And like, I'm maximizing my efficiency. It's just like, are you? Or are you like not learning anything because you're not engaging with humans in the real world? But I don't know. I feel like that's what my classes are now. Like the whole semester is like, what if you were a human, and what if you wrote to another human and that human read it and they actually thought about it? What would you want to say? And what would you want them to say in response? And like, maybe that's a good thing that we should try to do.
Yeah. And both of you know this, but listeners probably don't know that in our profession, I'm a very like tech forward person, but I still feel like the thing. So in my class currently in 2026, I am both teaching students about prompt engineering, but then also trying to teach them about finding their own voice and the value in their own voice as a writer. And I feel like I could not do one without the other. And that's the thing that this movie, I think, is trying to present. It's like this idea of like, well, we can't just do things the way Miranda's always done, but the world is changing and we have to change with it. But at the same time, we also can't just listen to Benji Barnes with his fake tan and aqua deficit and like making all the decisions. And we can't also give things over entirely to retail, right? Because that's the other parallel is like, the quality of Andy's writing is being judged on the clicks and the attention it's getting. And at the same time, it's fashion world is less about the art and more about, the Emily character has more power as the CEO of Dior or whatever, because people want to buy stuff more than they want to appreciate fashion as an art. It's like more of the commodification than the art, right?
But then,
I feel like that's the fundamental tension.
When she does the tour of the store, though, what does she emphasize? She's not like, we're going to sell so much. She's like, I got to do this display that's a tribute to so like the human is still very much a part of who she wants to be, and she's within that. Yes, well, and just because you both talked about your teaching and I want to talk about mine. So I had a really good conversation with a student this semester he and I were negotiating an AI misuse, in my opinion, and perfectly fine use in his opinion. And he had taken all my teaching materials and fed it into ChatGPT so that ChatGPT could make suggestions about how to fix his essay for this. And I said, well, number one, those are my materials. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to give those to ChatGPT, which hadn't occurred to him. But the second point is I went the PT route, which is to say, actually, you could have come to my office hours and it would have taken you a little longer, but there are innumerable social benefits to you having done that. I understand you're trying harder. I can give you better quality advice than ChatGPT. I still believe that. And that, you are building a relationship with me so that when you need a letter of recommendation, maybe you ask me and I can do a better job and I can use that anecdote to help you get that job you want, even though you're just thinking, I got to get through this writing class to take my GPA to this metric to get it higher and higher.
Mm.
And I actually think that is very much in line with this film, that this film in the end is about surround yourself with the people you like. And that beautiful last shot is like, we could still have this. We could still carve out a beautiful little space in this world where we can deal with each other and create whatever art we can while the billionaires let us. And so I think absolutely that is a theme here. I don't know if it was a thesis, please, but to me, it's certainly in the mix. And I don't know that I don't know that had been high on my mind until you all were talking about it. So thank you for that.
Yay.
See, humans inside of tech. We did it. We did it. Yes. Now, please click subscribe. Boop, boop, boop.
Yeah, that being said.
How inefficient.
So it's interesting because I feel like I've shifted my attitude about what the central thesis of this movie is. I came into this thinking I was going to say a thing about working women and working women supporting other working women. But now I'm realizing maybe actually it's about artists supporting artists. Right. Or writers and artists, like creator, but I don't want to use the word creator because like now that's a loaded term.
Yeah. Or like cultural
creator.
Yeah. I mean, artists, something like that.
I'll ask this question because PT didn't listen to our last episode, so doesn't know that.
I'll listen to this podcast now.
One of your suggestions was that, Miranda in the first movie was acting like a man and being treated poorly because she was trying to be the male version or the female version of that kind of male machismo. I think it's fair to say, in relation to the thesis you just offered, isn't this an indictment of the men? like to your point, that the men who control power now and deal with it are all dweebs, right? I mean, what was the famous tweet from like last year? Like, I always knew mediocre white men would ruin the world, but I didn't realize they'd be this lame, right? Yeah. And it does feel like that's part of the thesis and the culture of this movie. So would you kind of put that working women in the spin of Miranda found a way to actually be a determined female leader, or are we just leaving gender out of it at that point? I don't know. Come on, represent all women, Jen. That's what you're here for.
Hashtag yes, all women.
Wow. So I think first of all, I think it's very noticeable that the movie is gendering these two approaches to the world, right? So I do think that is a part of it. And I do think that the idea that the Lucy Liu character is the one who's she's impossible to get an interview with, but she connects with Miranda because she's like, you should not be defined by your marriage and divorce. Like, you should be defined by you and your work. And and that's what gets them to connect. Right. And so the idea that at the end of the movie, the Lucy Liu character returns the favor by being like, look, like all the dudes in this movie are ruining this for you because they're like dismantling what you stand for and what you want to do. But because I understand your plight as a woman in this industry, and as a working woman who doesn't want to be defined by their gender, but wants to be defined by the work that they do and the quality of the work that they do, I am going to offer this to you. And in that way, it's like kind of sad because it is sort of a fantasy, like that they all end up in the office like that because of her, right? But at the same time, I think that's what the movie's trying by positioning it that way. That's what the movie's trying to say. In terms of Miranda and kind of how she's changed her character, I do think that it's, again, goes back to that scene, that final scene with her and Andy in the car, where she says, "Oh, but isn't it? I love working. Like, isn't working great though? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so this idea that like when the first Devil Wears Prada was made, it was more taboo to say something like that as a woman, right? To be like, but don't you just love the work and want to keep doing this? And So, and the fact that that's wrapped up in their full conversation, that's sort of about like, whereas the end of the previous movie is more Miranda saying, like, you just gotta do these things that kind of compromise you as a person. You don't get to have a life and a job, right? That's her kind of stance on it, where she's like, take it or leave it. And then Andy decides to leave it, right? And kind of go forge her own path because she doesn't want to be like Miranda. I think the idea in that the parallel at the end of this movie, the parallel scene at the end of this movie sort of shows how they've evolved, and that Miranda doesn't think that way anymore. And she's like, yeah, like I think Amanda Dobbins made the joke of like, it's called having it all. but I think there's something to that, in the sense that like the in the past 20 years, that is what has changed, both for Miranda and for women all over the world, right? Is that somehow that balance, we're a little closer to striking that balance than we were in 2006. So I don't know if that actually answers your question, but
I think it did.
The only thing I will add as a man who needs to explain a little bit more about this is I think there it is very gendered, and I think that is clearly there. But it does feel like, as much as it is the sort of like working women, connecting with women trying to like actually, even Miranda realizing like, okay, like I can have it all, which potentially again maybe is like. But her home life got better because she found a better partner. She found someone that actually fits in with what she does and how she operates. So, again, that's sort of interesting. I do think, in terms of thinking about it as the thesis, is it's more about people needing people, and they're on the people side. And that is gendered because, again, it's Mackenzie Scott is the real person's name. I had to look it up. I apologize. But Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, who is the philanthropist, who's trying to give away her money and like keeps giving it away and keeps making so much more, because once you're a billionaire, you can't lose it. But is out there, and that sort of Lucy Liu's character is based on that. So it is very gendered within the movie, to Greg's point, that like, the jerk billionaires are all guys, and the nice one is a woman, and then our heroes are mostly women, and Nigel and and Caleb from the internet, who's the number 2, the number 1 assistant. But they that it is about like the people needing each other, and even Miranda realizing that like these sort of cycling through the disposable, like, there's millions of girls who would want this job. Maybe that's not true anymore, because this is the dying industry. And so actually maybe you need the people who do want to be there. And so like, that's something that there's no kind of big speech from her about all of it, but that does feel like an underpinning here. And I think it's interesting that it can be read both ways, about on the gender lines, and also just on the sort of, again, human art culture versus technological efficient algorithm, etc. side of things, that like, it works in both of those areas.
I will say that my favorite Easter egg that I hadn't gotten to work into the conversation yet is actually a total metaphor for that, which is in the final scene. Anne Hathaway is wearing the cerulean blue sweater again, and it's been cut apart and refashioned and organized into a new kind of trendy, awesome look. And then the other Easter egg that's similar is it opens by saying runway spring floral gala or whatever. Yeah. So like, yeah. So both of those I think are kind of making the point that this is all like, this is what this industry does. This is what this world does. And it's up to us to make sure that we take the old and make it function in the new world. And maybe, hey, we're losing sight of that a little bit, becoming inhuman, and we can do this again, and we can create great things in this world. Colson Whitehead, one of my favorite novelists, just had a great op-ed that his whole point was like, yeah, I run my whole life through AI, but I don't let AI touch my art. And I think that's exactly the thesis here, right? Like, let AI do whatever you want, but not this one thing. This is ours. This art is ours. So it's really great. I just wanted to shout out that editorial. People should teach it. But Jen, while we're talking about everything old being new again, I think we should close out this episode by talking about Oscars Watch.
Thank you, Greg. I'm just going to play the music. Oh, no.
No, yeah. Well.
Are you? Bezos invaded your sound.
Technology bites back.
All right. So, again, as a reminder to listeners, we're at the point in the year where it's a brand spanking new Oscar season that's barely started. And so inevitably this conversation is going to exaggerate. It's going to exaggerate the Oscar chances of this movie, which could be none because it's a sequel. But we're bored this time of year with the Oscars, so forgive us for whatever we're about to say. But does this have any chances of anything? The original, as Greg and I pointed out last time, got nominations for Meryl Streep and for costumes.
I think costumes and original song are just a given. While I obviously have been very positive about this, I don't think all of the performances were just so effortlessly good that nobody had that like big real moment. And so I kind of think it'll be left out of the performances category and treated just for some of its craft.
I agree. The only pushback or potential disagreement is I could see a little momentum building around like, man, Meryl Streep, like we nominate her a lot, sure, but like, shouldn't she have won for The Last Devil Wears Prada? Don't we have a chance to make up for that? And that maybe getting her into the conversation. I don't listen to the show. However, I don't know how much you went into that she was nominated in lead last time even though she's top billed, I would say she's very much a supporting performance in that movie. That feels like reverse category fraud going in a direction we're not used to maybe seeing. And also maybe I think, could she have had a better chance to win if she was in supporting? I don't know how people feel. Jennifer Hudson's great in Dreamgirls, but like, would she have been a march to a definite win as opposed to if Meryl Streep was there? I'm not certain, but if she's willing to campaign in supporting, very much, as Jen was saying, very much dependent on it so early. We don't know what's really coming down the road. But it feels like, is it possible that there's 3 or 4 like strong leading candidates and then it starts to be, well, there's a bunch of other supporting performances and like Meryl Streep could be in that conversation and then suddenly make their way in. Like if anybody is going to get a 4th Oscar among the people who have 3, it would be if Daniel Day-Lewis came back and did some big, huge, towering performance again, not Anemone, all due respect. Or it would be Meryl Streep, where I think people would be like, oh yeah, Meryl Streep should tie the record for most Oscars. Sure. So, I could see that happening, but this is the same conversation that I had around Denzel Washington Gladiator, which didn't happen and didn't go anywhere. So.
Wait, I forgot. I wanted to shout out because we haven't mentioned it. They one of the sequences lifted from the first movie is the montage where Anne Hathaway changed all her outfits, except this time they do it with four of them. So when you're talking about costumes, like the fact that they had all those kind of micro looks and zipped through them like they were nothing. I really enjoyed the assistant getting kind of promoted there to be like, yeah, she should also get a new look every time, which she would. Like, it makes sense in the world of the movie. Mm-hmm. But you're like, well, it feels like we did this for our 3 main actors and then we let her come along. But that styling was incredible, even as somebody who only pretends to know about fashion. And so I think that's just an easy, put that in the hands of every voter and you'll get the costume award this year, unless people really like sandals in the Odyssey.
Sorry.
I was going to say swords and sandals, but then I was like, swords are props. Okay. So they don't. It's just the sandals. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, that's a solid argument for sure. And the costume branch does have a history of nominating 1 or 2 movies every year that aren't like in contention for much else. In fact, I think the Cruella movie that we gave a brief shout out to last time, I think is one of those examples, right? Where it's like, it just got a costume nomination and nothing else. It might have gotten makeup in here too. I can't remember, but even though it was like not taken seriously for anything else. So yeah, that is a distinct possibility. I do want to kind of update my original song watch on this. Lady Gaga actually wrote 3 original songs for this. So there's one called Runway, which we actually, and all 3 of them are in the movie. They're not end credit songs. So there's the first one is the song that has the montage that you're talking about. It's called Runway. And then there's one that the Lady Gaga performs at the show in Italy called Shape of a Woman, which to me sounds the most like it would be an Oscar baity kind of song, like fits with what gets nominated a lot of the time. I could definitely see Lady Gaga performing that with a bunch of backup dancers wearing crazy costumes at the Oscars. And then she wrote a song that's sort of the Miranda song, and it plays over when Miranda. It's like right after the Lady Gaga performance, because they're intercutting between Lady Gaga performing at the show and then Miranda leaving and walking, and so the it's called Glamorous Life, and I think it's playing as Miranda is like walking down that like Italian plaza that's closed, like it shows Prada on one side and Chanel maybe on the other, or no, Louis Vuitton. Not that matters.
I definitely knew from the fashion world, and not because they showed it all the time during the Milan Olympics.
So anyway, that's just to say that they would have to pick one of those to actually campaign it, because I think K-pop Demon Hunters is a good example of why that's a smart move, to just like put all your eggs in one song basket. But
then Encanto is the reason why it's not a good move, because they did that and then I didn't realize which one was going to be the big hit and ended up kind of stuck with the ballad instead of Bruno.
And then Barbie's the example of it did win, but it was the crappier song. Like Dua Lipa, right. all the time, forever, right? That's the one you hear all the time still being played in restaurants and bars versus...
Well, that's weird that's how you pronounce I'm Just Ken, but okay.
I was gonna say, yeah, Barbie had 3 songs that were actually kind of, I guess, like this, like that could have been in
had cultural
I
impact.
Think all 3 of those songs are better than these songs, to be honest.
Sure.
Apologies to Lady Gaga.
The answer to this question will be this movie's coming out early enough. What's the song that is, if there's a song that's played on the radio in 5 months?
Yeah,
like that's the one,
right? And we don't even know what the Diane Warren song is going to be, so.
I'm stuck on imagining PT like going to a bar, getting a beer, and just having I'm Just Ken coming on over the speakers. He's jamming out.
That feels like there's definitely bars in LA where that happens. I feel like there are definitely places. I can't say I know, and I've been there, but I'm sure I could find it if I tried.
My one complaint about the Lady Gaga factor with this movie is that A Song Is Born clearly showed that we know how to shoot Lady Gaga. And this movie did not. Part of that is the drone problem that PT was talking about, because they did that the most, the backwards drone zoom.
Yes,
with the runway show. But I was like, man, there's a missed opportunity here.
That was also the time when I felt the most like, oh, here's the part of the movie they need to do to get the Oscar nomination for this song. And it makes sense in the context of this is what would happen at a big fashion event. I am confident they do have pop stars, like at the Met Gala. I'm assuming there was a pop star performance. But yeah, I mean, I was completely checked out. I was like, yep, this is a song. It's happening. Okay. Excited for when the characters in the movie show up again. Even though, again, despite that snide dismissal, I still think the dressing room scene between her and Miranda is so strong that I think Lady Gaga is a strong feature player candidate, because like that was great. That was so fun. And like they did a good job hitting.
And she's also pro Nigel. That really was endearing. Yeah. She was like, yeah, that doesn't sound like something.
Sound like him. Nope, sounds like someone else.
So wait, did they have beef or a beef? Did we settle that?
It's beef.
It's beef. I was wrong. I think
what it really is you could go either way, but the current descriptivist use of this would be mass noun beef. And that's it. That's the end of our episode.
On that really insightful note, Greg, close us out. Where can folks find you?
I'm on the internet sometimes, and wherever I am, I usually report that through my Instagram account, which is at EyonCanon, EYEONCANON. Over at Rebel Base Card, we are finishing up the Maul Shadow Lord commentary, and we just booked our finale guest, and it's a really good guest. So look for that episode coming out very soon, or maybe just before this episode dropped, but it should be in your feeds likely. And then other than that, I'm on Letterboxd. I really have, like, my movie totals have been so slow the last month. I'm almost looking like a PT over here. And if things get worse, I'm going to look like a Jen up in this place. So, but I still am sneaking out to a few things. And PT took a very good shot at me earlier. But I will say, I recently saw Aliens in the theater, and go check out that Letterboxd review, because that's a movie from the 80s. And it's a banger on the big screen. I got to say, it's a good time. The new 4K master is top notch. Just a shout out. PT, if you see that movie, where would people know about it?
Why they could find what I think about that movie, which I watched at home because I didn't know it was playing in the theaters, but I did watch recently at home on my Letterboxd, which is at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. I did just check. I am somehow only 4 movies behind you for this year. Oof. I thought you were overstating how much you have slacked off, but a combination of me watching too much and you watching too little has led us to this point. I did not look up Jen's numbers for,
there's no point.
Politeness reasons. But you could look at the show on Letterboxd as well. The account there is at LTR Pod. You can also look for us on social media. We're on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. You could send us an email, any messages you have, any corrections or whatever to the longtakereview@gmail.com. Or you can just follow the podcast wherever you're listening. You can add us, like us, subscribe us, heart us, plus us, whatever the mechanism is where you're listening. Subscribe, get the latest episodes as they drop. We are about to enter Star Wars season. We've got the first Star Wars movie in the history of this podcast and the first one in 7 years in theaters. And so we've got a couple of related episodes coming up. And then we are for sure in the heart of summer. Like, we are definitely in it. And so we will be reviewing new summer movies, doing some like more look back history things when we don't like the summer movies that are coming out and don't want to talk about them. And just having a great time for the warm weather out there. So please subscribe and follow along. Jen, where can folks find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI, or on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jinn.
That's all.
Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free, and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. You'll also receive occasional written reviews of new Star Wars and Marvel.
That's all.